and welcome to the 16th episode, the Two Retired Homeschoolers podcast. I'm Rebecca, your host, and this is Holly, my lesser host.
The co-host who is just as equal.
Today we're talking about By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. And I realized for a while that we should start doing this, but it's especially true of this book. Like, the episode is just full of spoilers everywhere. Like, Holly's about to give a summary, and the summary is going to spoil the book. So, fair warning.
Yeah, especially since it's a mystery book. It's rather important that there's spoilers. And by the way, this is a really good book. So if you like Agatha Christie, I would definitely give this a read before listening to the episode. Okay. By the Pricking of My Thumbs, a title coined from a line in Shakespeare's Macbeth, is about a couple, Tommy and Tuppence Beresford's adventures into uncovering the murderer behind the deaths of several children in the village of Sutton Chandler. After an investigation into unexplained deaths at a nursing home, a quaint yet haunted mansion that is only half occupied, and a diamond stuffed doll found in a fireplace, the clues lead them to a coffin full of treasure and the most unlikely killer. Tuppence finds herself in danger in the company of an elderly woman named Mrs. Lancaster, whom she had always believed was a victim rather than a criminal. Da 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 da.
So, why did you pick this book, Holly?
Well, because my grandpa, who just passed away last October, he had read this book like 8 times. He actually wrote in the margin, like the first page, the date of every time he had read the book, which is crazy. And it was his favorite Agatha Christie book. This is my first Agatha Christie book. I felt it was super important to read one of her books at some point because she is like the world's best-selling author after Shakespeare and the Bible. So I thought, why not do By the Pricking of My Thumbs, which seemed to be a solid one of her books and also not the most famous ones anyway.
Yeah, for sure. It Fun story. It's actually like this isn't the first time I've read an Agatha Christie book, but this book was the first Agatha Christie book I read. Like way back when I was a kid, I found it from the library and read it, and it was the first Agatha Christie book I'd read.
Wow, how old were you?
Oh, I do not remember.
Because if you were super young, I would be a little concerned that you read this book.
Yeah, I remember being creeped out by it, but
Yeah, it was creepy for me, and I'm 19.
I mean, I don't think I was like really young. I'm sure double digits. I'm sure my age. I wasn't like 7 or anything.
Okay, do we want to dive into a few facts about Agatha Christie?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, she was born in 1890. She died in 1976. Um, so she was raised in like a upper middle class family, and she served as a war nurse during World War One, where she learned a lot about different types of poisons, and she later used that knowledge to write her books. Um, she fell in love and later divorced Royal Artillery officer Archibald Christie. And actually, it's a really sad story. He ended up falling in love with another lady, so he wanted to divorce Agatha. And it led to this huge scandal where she just like disappeared for 11 days. And the press already knew about her, and like she was already famous at that point. So the news was like all over this event. Like everyone was looking for her. Like airplanes and investigators and police officers and the news obviously. So yeah, that was like a huge deal, and I learned about that after doing a little bit of digging.
What did she like? Where did they find her? What happened?
I think she was at a hotel, and it wasn't actually as dramatic as everyone was making it seem, but I think the press just really wanted drama.
Right. But she was just like upset, so she checked into a hotel.
Yeah, I mean, it was after she had had a huge argument with her husband. So it's really unfortunate that that happened. And then, like, everyone was so interested in your personal business like that. Seems kind of nightmarish.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was an unfortunate relationship, but she later remarried and remained married till the end of her life. She enjoyed riding, hunting, roller skating, and dancing. And initially, she was not a success as a writer. It took a while, but she ended up writing 66 books. And she became known as the Queen of Mystery and was later made a dame by Elizabeth II for her genius and contribution to literature. And she, like I said before, she's today's best-selling author after Shakespeare and the Bible, which is crazy. Like, that blows my mind. But yeah. So, first impressions of the book. Do you want to start?
I like how it starts really, really innocently. It's not like they're just an ordinary couple kind of, and it's not like they're a policeman and then a case gets brought in. It's like she just notices something slightly off. She has like an intuition about someone, and then she's like, "You know what? I am going to figure out what's at the bottom of this. Like it might be nothing, but I'm just going to figure it out because I have nothing else to do. I'm an old person now." And so she like it seems really hard to track down this picture, and she's not sure it will lead her anywhere, but she's just like very terrier like in her persistence, and
And the picture, by the way, is a painting of the house.
of a house that she finds out and it's connected with a bunch of stuff. Yeah. um
Yeah.
and I remember when I first read this as a kid, I was not used to reading books that had older people as protagonists, like, yeah, adults, but young adults. These are like older adults, and I thought that was really fun that they were like not in their physical prime, but they were still like the heroes of the story.
I couldn't figure out if they were in their 50s or 60s. They talked about themselves like they were in their 60s, but people always think they're older than they actually are.
Yeah, like, yeah, they could have totally just been in their 50s. And I really like the dialogue style. I just love how Tommy and Tuppence talk to each other. But the other first impression is this book is just as creepy rereading it. Like I remember reading it as a child, and like when you're piecing together what, even when you don't even know that that's what's going on, with like all the kids dying and you don't know why, and then like Tommy's talking to the doctor, and the doctor's like something sketchy might have been going on at the nursing home, and here's like cases of like serial poisoners and stuff, and it just like so creepy, like especially the lady who um was like the angel of whatever town. She was like a French lady, and she like nursed the sick kids, and the kids always died, and it took forever for people to figure it out. And the fact that people like that actually exist, like it's so creepy. Like it's not like a regular, I don't know, it's just really creepy. And just the way she did it, it's not like she's like playing spooky music in your face to make you feel creeped out, but man, um there is a chill up your spine and a prick in your thumbs by the end of
Yeah.
it. And like, oh, and when the reveal happens, oh, it's so creepy. And I remembered the main twist, and I remembered that that's what this book was about. But I was still like had that like slow feeling of like cold fingers up my spine as I was
Mm-hmm.
reading it this time. So she did that aspect really well.
Okay. Again, I didn't really know what to expect going into this. I knew Agatha Christie was supposed to be super good, but I've never been like a huge mystery nerd. I like the show White Collar just because it's not all about murder all the time. In fact, most of the time it's about like theft or forgery or fraud.
Yeah, I agree with that. I prefer that kind of thing to the murder ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially since they make the murder ones gruesome. But even if they didn't make them gruesome, I think white collar crime is just more fun.
Like unnecessarily gruesome too. It's just like this doesn't fit the vibe of what mystery shows should be like about intelligence and investigation, which in real life, of course, there's going to be violence when a murder happens, but it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The intrigue for me is not in the murder, so I've never been attracted by those sorts of plots. I mean, I dabbled in the Nancy Drew, and I guess I never really read Hardy Boys, but I read something very similar to it, and I can't remember what it was growing up. But again, I've never been much of a mystery person. And certainly, I would think like you wouldn't be able to reread a mystery book because once you know everything, unless like you forget it somehow. But like you were saying, you enjoyed rereading it, and my grandpa reread it 8 times, so it must have been well done. Um, so the weird thing about this book is it has a comforting mood. Like everything is quaint and nice, and people are like good people in this book. And I actually got good feelings from reading it a lot of the time. But there was always this undertone of creepiness, which kind of goes into what we'll be talking about, the creep factor of this book. But there was like this undertone of mystery, and it's like usually with books, it's like there's a slow incline of suspense. And I would say that's true for this book, but it was more just an undertone that was always there. Um, and not so much like an in your face type of thing.
Yeah.
So that was strange to me to read a book that like I mutually felt comforted and disturbed by.
That is totally the vibe of the book.
Yeah. And so it was a book I could have easily been bored by, but I wasn't. And um, I liked that it didn't go on, but it wasn't like a short book. So, and the characters were interesting, and I think that Agatha Christie specializes in dialogue and character descriptions, both of which are very interesting to me. So it seemed like a book that would like be particularly interesting to me. And also about the murder thing, like yes, even though the plot was centered around all these murders, it was unique in that it was children being killed, which is extra awful, but at the same time it was about so much more than just murders. There was a lot of different like criminal activity in it, which you learn later on. So I appreciated that element as well. So those are my first impressions.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. The book is like I was noticing that too. The book is like all dialogue practically. Like even where characters are thinking, half the time they're like thinking to each other, so it's actually dialogue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So much dialogue. And it gets kind of lost in it. Like, I mean, I said it gets kind of lost in it. I mean that the clues get kind of lost in the dialogue because you're getting
Mm-hmm.
clues from what people say, but you don't know which things are clues, and it all feels like a natural conversation just happening. And like, so Tuppence is kind of baffled by it, but you also are kind of baffled by it because you don't know which parts are important and which parts aren't. Um, oh, did you like the twist that Mrs. Lancaster was Philip Stark's wife, who wasn't dead after all?
Yeah, I think it made a lot of sense. And I was like, man, if this boils down to one person being behind all of this, I'm kind of going to be disappointed just because, and I wouldn't say she did this like to it annoyingly deceiving extent, but a lot of time mystery authors will make you think, oh, is it this character? Is it this character? And then they give clues leading to all these different characters when really, like in real life, probably the actual clues would only be leading to the real perpetrator of crime. And so that always annoyed me with mystery. And she did that a little bit, but it wasn't like unconvincing, and it wasn't like, oh, I was purposely led astray. You know, I like mysteries where it really is a true puzzle that you can figure out and not just like, oh, the author is just setting this up for me and hand feeding me all the information. Yeah, so I liked that there were actual several characters behind all of it, but it was Mrs. Lancaster herself who was like the real mind behind the crime. But yeah, I like that there were other people like consciously trying to cover it up
Mm-hmm.
involved.
And that was she also, I forget, was she also the girl who lost her baby?
Yeah, so the whole book was about basically, so she had a child outside of wedlock and she decided it was inconvenient or whatever, so she decided to abort it. And then she got involved with all these criminal gangs, and it had to do with the house and that they were like stowing away treasure and stuff in these houses and getting past the police doing it. Um,
Right. And then, but they were like, well, she's too much of a liability because she's actually crazy and likes to kill people. And we just want to steal stuff and make money and not be inconvenienced by unnecessary killing. And so then she
I
married
don't
the
remember
one guy.
that.
Yeah,
I
they
think
said,
it was more like she just decided, hey, I just want to have a normal life and get married, and then she tried to have a kid with her husband, and then they were like, oh, we can't have children, and then she was so guilt ridden and regretful that she was like, it was weird because she was like, I need to pay for my sin, but I'm gonna do it by murdering more kids, which I think was also a revenge sort of thing against life itself, because she was like, why is it that I can't have a kid? So she just started killing other kids as like sacrifices per se to God, which was really weird. I didn't think that the whole religious thing was necessary.
I didn't either. I thought that was just kind of odd. Like, it would have just made
Yeah.
more sense if it was she had this obsession, but it wasn't somehow tangled up with her weird religious belief that didn't really fit.
Yeah, and I get that she's mad, but it seemed like it was taking it a little bit of a step too far, and it was a bit unnecessary. But yeah, I'm that's interesting you agree with me about that. But yeah, basically she was guilty slash wanted, she was just angry and taking it out on other kids.
She was also like unbalanced. Like she was
Yeah.
unbalanced.
And she was insane and mad, basically.
um, oh, and I liked how that like it made sense how was her name Copley? Mrs. Copley was like she always
Hmm.
suspected Sir Philip because he was just too fond of children. And it like that wasn't just like a random clue to make you suspect Sir Philip. It it actually made sense in context once you realized that he really wanted kids and then his wife couldn't have kids and then he found out that his wife was a child murderer.
And I like that Mrs. Lancaster is actually intelligent, even though she's insane, and she's not like she looks like a perfectly nice old lady who has delusions, but is nice and just and I thought that was interesting because Agatha Christie kind of dives into the psychology behind a villain and insane psychopaths and how they appear to be completely normal people. And I wonder if she was making it all up or if she like knew about stuff in real life and used that to come up with her fictional plots. But
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, while we're on the topic, do you want to just dive headfirst into the creep factor?
Sure. What makes it so creepy? Like what causes that undertone?
Well, I think, first of all, just the fact that she's killing children right off. Like, it's one thing to just kill someone because you want revenge or you want money or whatever, but it's usually adults. Like, killing children, it's like, what motivation would you have for that? And then like why would you kill helpless human beings? And the way she did it too, like by feeding them cocoa or milk or something and poisoning it. And then the fact that she killed someone at the nursing home that she was staying at with milk, I think.
Yeah, well, cause she gave her cocoa because she loved cocoa. She was the lady who loved cocoa. I wonder if you would like, you know how Tuppence just got like a creepy feeling, like whenever Mrs. Lancaster asked her about the child, was it your poor child?
Yeah.
Do you think people get feelings like that? Have you ever had that with someone where you
Female
just,
intuition.
yeah,
Yes, but I don't remember enough of the instances I have felt it to know if like to like follow through to the end to know if they were actually creepy or not.
hmm,
But yeah, I think intuition is a thing. I wanted to ask you, however, because I know you were talking about that society of British people who like got together. It was like a special club, and they were like sworn to not
oh, you mean the
making
detective
these.
club?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things they couldn't do was rely on female intuition. So do you think that's a weak point, or
Oh, did you know that Agatha Christie was the president of that club at one point?
really?
Yeah,
No, I did not.
yeah,
Makes sense though.
it does. Well, I don't think, okay, because intuition is a real thing, right? So if you use it, that's
Hmm.
fine. But if you use it to just like Deus Ex Machina your plot to completion, yeah, no, that's not good. So I think the fact that Tuppence had female like her intuition started the plot, it didn't solve the plot. And it was based on an
Yeah.
actual like weird thing that Mrs. Lancaster said. Like she said, "Was it your poor child behind the chimney?" Like normal old ladies don't say that to you. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
I don't think that was a weakness because Tuppence did not use her intuition to figure stuff out. She used her brain and then her intuition helped her, but like it didn't all come together with her to her because of intuition. It all came together to her because of research and putting clues together and finding stuff out, which is how a mystery should work.
Yeah, and there was also, intuition just in general, not just female intuition. Like Tommy had some intuition when he was trying to figure out Mr. Eccles and all that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I wonder in real life if females really do have an edge in the intuition industry, if we're just more accurate or we tend to have it more. Like, what's that about? Why do they call it female intuition?
I don't know. I don't think I have it, so I really don't know.
I want to talk about the climax. So, Tuppence is running away from Mrs. Bly, and she goes to the house, and Mrs. Lancaster is there to greet her, which she never knew where Mrs. Lancaster was in it. You'd have to read the book, but anyway, so she takes her into this secret hidden room in the house, and Tuppence still thinks that Mrs. Lancaster is like the sweet old lady who is a victim of Mrs. Bly or whoever is behind all these killings. Um, and then, okay, so first of all, the entry into the secret room, that was cool and believable, in my opinion. And second of all, you know, in movies where it's just like, okay, and now the villain is going to conveniently explain his whole plan to the hero, even though there's no reason to. And it's like, why did you do that? Um, in this book, it actually made sense just because Mrs. Lancaster was insane and she seemed to enjoy, like, it's almost like she got a kick out of disturbing people, kind of like she did when she asked Tuppence, like, was it your poor child, at the beginning of the book, and she was always saying odd things, so she seemed to get a kick out of that. And then when she told Tuppence all thing and saw Tuppence like slowly freaking out, like, she just burst out in laughter, which is a very typical thing to do with a villain, but it just seemed to make sense with Mrs. Lancaster. Like, she's just that insane. And then,
And when you pictured like the sweetest old white-haired little lady doing it, it's kind of creepy. Like that's actually intimidating, unlike some random mustachioed villain just being like, "I have you now." You know?
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Emily's looking at me like, "What the heck are you doing?" Oh.
Making fantastic content for this podcast. Um, yeah, and then, so what was even more creepy was the fact that Mrs. Lancaster offered Tuppence poisoned milk. Like, she was like, here's a glass of milk. You want this. Go ahead and drink it, dear. And, like, instead of, like, just like, okay, and now I'm going to kill you, pulls out the gun. It's like, no, here's a glass of milk. And then okay, and another thing I really liked about this writing is, so Tuppence throughout the whole book, she's a very capable, level-headed lady, um, who's not easily given to fantasies, but when she like is suspicious of stuff, it's accurate and totally makes sense. So I had a lot of respect for Tuppence and her strategies for going about trying to figure out crime and all that. And then, so this whole book, she's calm, even when she's in dangerous situations like getting conked over the head, or going to the church to like find that Bible in that scene, and being faced with Mrs. Bly. Like, through this whole thing, she has this sort of like competent confidence. And then she just starts freaking out with Mrs. Lancaster in the room, like just absolutely going crazy, like grabbing a chair, smashing against the window, like screaming for help. Like, she loses her cool. And that, to me as a reader, because I like, I don't know, I always sympathize with Tuppence the most and her perceptions of scenes and stuff the most. It also made me freak out because I was like, oh my gosh, if Tuppence is losing it, I'm gonna lose it too.
Yeah.
I will say one of the things that didn't make sense to me is, so after Tuppence refuses to drink the milk, Mrs. Lancaster pulls out like a dagger and starts walking towards her, and for whatever reason, this very old lady is able to overpower Tuppence to the point that she can like press her against the chair and bring the blade closer to her. And that didn't make sense to me because it's like, okay, this is a feeble old lady. How on earth is she able to overpower Tuppence to this extent?
Search me.
Did it bother you? Because it bothered me a lot.
I remember thinking it was weird, and then Tuppence was like, "Oh no, I won't be able to overpower her because she's mad, and mad people always have unusual
Super
strength."
strength.
I was like, "Okay." Yeah, I don't know.
And like, I feel like it was a little unnecessary. Like, Tuppence is unarmed. Mrs. Lancaster can still be old and weak and feeble and like walk towards her in this enclosed room where she can't get out because only Mrs. Lancaster knows the way out. It's a secret chamber. So she could just like walk and chase Tuppence around the room, which would almost be creepier.
Oh, Holly, that would be so creepy if they're just like playing leapfrog around the room. Leapfrog, like with her knife. Oh, you dodged behind the chair. That's a good one. And then she's just like, "Which way am I gonna go?"
Although I still think Tuppence should have been able to like grab Mrs. Lancaster and take the knife away somehow.
Was Mrs. Lancaster like in her 80s or was she like 62?
Yeah, I think she was in her 60s or something. Yeah, you know, I didn't think about that. That is a good point. I would say the plot twist was well done. It was completely unexpected, super well, one of the best plot twists I've ever read.
I agree. Yep.
Okay, let's move on to our next theme. What is the point of mystery?
Oh, yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about this because I feel like, well, it has sort of two aspects to it. Um, the first aspect is when you could like write books that's not about people murdering other people and being devious and, murdering people. Like, what really is the point of a murder mystery? Like, is there anything really good about reading a book just because it creeps you out? Or writing a book just because it will creep someone out? Like, what is the actual point of a murder mystery, not just from an entertainment standpoint? Um, do you want to give me your answer to that before I ask you the second part of my question?
Well, I don't have an answer, but I do have an observation. Growing up, we were never allowed to celebrate Halloween, and my parents always kept us away from any creepy or scary shows. Um, and it's the same for all five of us. Like, I have four sisters. We all have the same thing. None of us can stand creepiness. Like, we find it unnecessary and weird. I think that's the main thing, strange and non entertaining. Like, we don't have any sort of appreciation for it. Um, which is interesting. I wonder how many kids, if they weren't raised with like, if they do end up just disliking it in their adulthood. So I've never understood the appeal of like people purposely seeking out to be creeped out. Um, and even stuff that isn't like creepy, like what are those people who do acrobats and like jump off buildings and do super scary stuff just for the thrill of it?
Adrenaline junkies?
Adrenaline junkies. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't even understand that. Like I like skydiving and being on roller coasters, but it's only fun to me because I know I'm safe. If I didn't know I was safe, that would not be enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
So I guess my observation is I don't really even understand the entertainment aspect of it. And this book, for some reason, I did appreciate it. And I think there's a difference between horror and mystery.
For
Because, like,
sure.
Nancy Drew and stuff like that. Huh?
I said for sure. I mean, I do think like the point of a mystery is to solve the puzzle and bring the killer to justice. Horror is not about solving the bad thing, it's about immersing yourself in the bad thing.
Yeah.
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 Anyways, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, that's really all there is to it. I do enjoy the puzzle parts of mystery. Um, I think it's a good reminder that, like, life is so bizarre. And sometimes you feel super comfortable and, like, oh, nothing strange ever happens. Kind of like Tommy did, actually, in the book. He's like, there's no way anything bad could happen to Tuppence. Nothing ever bad happens to Tuppence. She's far too capable and level headed. And then turns out she was like, conked over the head by a creepy lady. So I think every once in a while something happens in life where it jars you and wakes you up and you're like, oh my gosh. And kind of like the Bible does when it's like describing the end times and it doesn't feel real. My sister and I were talking about this just yesterday. Like, we were discussing how Revelation does not feel real, and neither of us could imagine anything like it happening in our lifetime. Um, and so I think mystery serves to remind us that, like, we're not as secure as we feel in this life. And I mean, it's different when you're a Christian and you have security in Christ, but like, life can be so weird. And also, I just think of like Roman times when it was commonplace to see people crucified along the roadside just to remind people of the cruelty of Rome and the fact that they needed to really obey the rules. Like, can you imagine being a mom raising your kids in that era? And like, how would you like help your kid experience that kind of trauma on a consistent basis? And like I feel like our time is just so much safer feeling than the world has been in different eras.
Yeah. I also wouldn't say I enjoy creepiness, but every now and then I really do enjoy creepiness, but it's always this specific type of creepiness. Like, I don't know why I enjoy this kind. Or like there's a book, The Perilous Guard, which is not a murder mystery, but there's like a little part of it and you're like, "Wait, that's what was going on that whole time?" I am so creeped out now. Like, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's something about a certain type of creepiness, but I don't know what it is. And it's not like I would seek it out, but when it happens, I enjoy it. I th- I think partly I enjoy it because it hits me like as accurate. Like it's a part of reality that you don't experience. Well, like you were saying, that's not how our world is. So it's a part of
Hmm.
reality that you don't experience that side of reality, but then like a little bit of it sort of peeks through the
But it's
veil.
still there. Like you don't experience it, but it's there.
Yeah, and it's like this vivid reminder. This is actually here. It's been here all along. I still don't know why I like it, but I that makes sense to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it could also boil down to the old battle of good versus evil, like
You like to see
with crime
Yeah, you like to see evil exposed where you're like, yeah, no, this feels, tastes, smells, looks evil, and it's very obvious.
and brought to justice. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been there all along. You haven't just been like stuck in your own head the whole time, like fighting phantoms. No, no, they're actually real.
One of the things I actually appreciate about White Collar is just the intelligence behind a lot of criminal activities. Whenever there's dumb criminals, I'm like, what is even the point? But whenever I see how genius people can be with their conniving sides of their brains, it's like very fascinating to me. So I will put that out there.
Yeah. Okay. Second half of my question about the point of murder mysteries. I thought of this question because I actually really recently listened to a podcast, and I actually really like this podcast. It's called Stories Are Soul Food. But they did an episode on murder mysteries or mysteries in general. And I was like, I'm not sure. I feel like you're missing the point. So I want to know what you think about this because they were basically saying that, like, a mystery that you only want to read once is not a good mystery, which is what C.S. Lewis would say about a book in general. If you only want to read it once,
Hmm.
it's not a good book. Because if you only want to read a mystery once, that means the only like good thing about it was the puzzle. And so once you know the twist, you don't want to read it again. But a good book should have more to it than just the puzzle. And so they were like going on about how a mystery isn't really about the mystery. It's about the characters and the human nature and the story and whatever. And I was like, okay, but at that point, what's even the point of distinguishing by genres? If you're saying that the only marker of anything is if it's a good story, like it's like you think the puzzle aspect doesn't matter, and I think the puzzle aspect has to matter. Like otherwise why write murder mysteries? Like or mysteries in general. I agree that yeah, I would agree that a good murder mystery is one that you could reread with like I did this one and your grandpa did this one. Murder mysteries attraction is just this like cheap, oh, it's a puzzle and it's not about actually drawing people in to experience good literature or whatever. Are we saying that mysteries are inherently an inferior genre to literary fiction? Because that seems dumb to me. Like, it seems like they should both have their things that they do, and you shouldn't say that a mystery is only good for the thing that it shares with all fiction. Well, what makes something a good mystery then, as opposed to simply a good story? And, like, I don't know, do you think there's a point to distinguishing between genres? Like, do you think there's something that makes something good fantasy apart from just being good story and something that makes something good mystery apart from just being good story?
I mean, I wouldn't know how to answer that apart from the things that like are stereotypical about a genre. So, of course, a mystery needs that puzzle element to be within the genre of mystery. And of course, fantasy needs like something otherworldly to make it fantasy, you know?
Right, but do you think those elements are like outer trappings? Do you think the heart of the story is just the characters or like
Yeah, I would say no. I would disagree with that. And probably you're right in that you need those extra added elements that make all books good in order to reread it and appreciate it on the level that books need to be appreciated on. But yeah, like it can't just be its own genre and that's all there is to it. Like there needs to be more like multi-dimensional basically. But yeah. I would say it's super important to nail your own genre if you really want to be within that genre.
yeah, that's what I think too. Maybe maybe if you think of it as like story and structure or and characters and theme, all that stuff that's just inherent in every story that exists is like the alloy, okay? The mixture
Mm-hmm.
that you pour into the mold. And the mold is whatever genre it is. So your mold has to be good and your alloy has to be good. And if one or the other is bad, it's a bad story. Like it has to be both just like good in its basic elements and good as a specific representation of the genre. Like, cause yeah, like if
Mm-hmm.
it was a great story with great characters, but like the mystery was really disappointing, that wouldn't be that good of a book, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like snow cones. Like you have to have the cone and you have to have the ice no matter what. Like that's the meat of it, the plot, the characters, the prose. But then however you flavor it, it should be good for snow cones. But if you flavor it cherry, then make it cherry, not blueberry.
Right. And please make it like a fruit flavor. Don't make it like Worcestershire sauce snow cone. That sounds gross.
That's a good point because I've noticed one of my weaknesses as an aspiring writer is that I just try to do far too much with one thing. And I need to stay in my lane and try to perfect one thing instead of like 10 different things and stuff it all into one story.
Yeah, simplicity.
Yeah. Basically, don't be Marvel. And there's my input of my Marvel reference for this episode.
Uh,
I love how I sound like such a Marvel hater.
I know, and you like Marvel more than I do.
It's because I want to like it more, I think. I'm just so disappointed by it, but I want it to be something great.
Anyway, yeah, be simple. Like this book is very simple. She follows a painting until she finds it, and it works. There, I drew a full circle. Okay.
Okay, do you want to wrap this episode up with discussing Tommy and Tuppence?
Tommy and Tuppence, I love them so much. I really want to read Partners in Crime because I haven't read that one yet, and I feel like it would be the best Tommy and Tuppence content. I've read this book, The Secret Adversary, and NRM, which NRM is stupid because she cheats. She should have been kicked out of the
Wait,
detective club
really?
for that. No, I'm not saying that Tuppence cheats on Tommy. I'm saying that Agatha Christie cheats
No,
as.
I knew you meant
Oh,
that.
okay, okay. I thought you thought I meant the other thing. Okay.
Like my brain immediately went to Tuppence cheating on Tommy, and it was like autocorrect. Oh, Agatha Christie. So I like somehow made that leap
Good job,
mentally.
Holly. Well, yeah, obviously, like Tommy and Tuppence, no, 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 no. Anyway,
No.
no, Agatha Christie, in my opinion, should have been kicked out of the detective club for N or M because the ending is cheating, and so I just hate that about it. But the Secret Adversary is a really fun one. It's when they're young. It's before they get married. I think they like are like, oh, we should marry each other at the end of it. But anyways, it's a fun one. Um, I love Tommy and Tuppence. Like the way she represents them when they're young, it's like still the same people, but now they're 50 in this book. And like I just love how they're such a comfy married couple. Like they know each other so well. They have so much like
Mm-hmm.
faith in each other's capability. And I love how Tuppence just wants to do whatever and then Tommy is like, "No, no, no. You're staying in bed until your concussion is over with, and even then you're staying within my sight because I don't trust you to not go get yourself coshed on the head again." I love Tuppence. She's such a good character. I really like her. Like she's just so fun to read. Like her thoughts and her just she's so unique, but also such a typical like nice old lady. I love her. She's awesome.
Yeah. She's like classic, but in her own genre, to put it
Pretty
that
much.
way. I was actually thinking as I read it, like she reminded me of you.
Oh, that is such a nice compliment.
But I would agree. I love their companionship. And as I was reading it, I was like, man, this is what marriage should look like. Um, and I also love how they overlook each other's faults. Like Tommy can be a bit bossy, but Tuppence doesn't really give it much mind because she's like, I mean, I'm gonna do what I want anyway. And then Tommy is constantly like super weary and angered even by Tuppence's susceptibility to getting involved in dangerous things, and he's constantly trying to rein her in. But at the same time, he has respect for her for wanting to do those things in the first place. So it's like they're a very good match in that their flaws are rather compatible in a way.
Yeah, I think that's actually like a good thing to consider when you get married. Like, have compatible flaws, because your life will just be so much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. If you can't avoid them, just make them a bit more bearable.
Oh, did you like Albert? Was that their butler's name? Al something, Albert, I think.
Yes, I love their butler.
Yeah. And he's like, "Sir, I think it may be a clue. We should look because it may be a clue. Is it perhaps a clue?" All right, you want to wrap up with favorite quotes?
Yes. You should start since you have several. Yeah.
Okay. Look here, Tuppence. This whole thing is all somethings and someone's. It's just an idea you've thought up. You don't want to go mixing yourself up in things that are no business of yours. There's nothing to be mixed up in, according to you, said Tuppence, so you needn't worry at all.
I liked that quote as well. I'll go. He raised his eyebrows. They were very convenient eyebrows for raising. The end of them near the nose went up, and the opposite end of the cheek went down for an almost astonishing extent. They made him, on very little provocation, look like a man who had had a severe shock, but actually, it was quite a common gesture with him. I don't know why I like that. I just thought it was a good example of her well done character descriptions.
I suppose what we ought to do is think, said Tuppence.
That's a good one. Oh, should I read? Okay. So I got this book from the library, and there's a certain part of it I had to read it on the podcast because there's this certain sentence that's underlined, and what they wrote in the margin was hilarious. So he's a man who covers his tracks with incredible ingenuity, so much so that one imagines that there aren't really any tracks at all. And then they wrote in cursive beside it, but there are tracks.
I'm starting with your being coshed on the head, said Tommy. Tuppence considered a moment. I don't see really that that's a starting point. I mean, it's the last thing that happened, not the first. It's the first in my mind, said Tommy. I won't have people coshing my wife.
Yeah, I liked that part.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. All right. Thank you everyone for I should look up whether it's actually the 15th or 16th episode. Okay, it's our 16th episode.
Okay.
Wow, we're like
Dang.
sweet 16. Okay. Everyone, this podcast has its driver's license. Okay. Why am I being polite? Emily's judging me. Thank you everyone for listening to the 16th episode of Two Retired Homeschoolers. Please come back next week. Please listen again next. Wait, no, it's 3 weeks. Please join us again 3 weeks from now for our next book. The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton.